Hello and welcome to this YouTube channel once again. In today's video, we're going to be talking about grant proposals. Do you want to do a research and you're seeking funds for that research? In this video, we're going to be taking you through the process of writing a successful grant proposal. And also, what most of us don't know is that the management of funds from a grant can be a very tedious process, even more tedious than the process of getting the grant. So we're going to be taking you through the process from pre-award to post-award of a grant proposal, how to write a grant proposal, and how to manage the funds when the grant has been given. So stick around to the end. At the end, we're going to be giving you some important tips as a takeaway on how to secure funding for your research in form of grants. So if you are ready, let's dive into the tutorials. But before we go further, here is an outline of what to expect from this tutorial. First of all, we are going to be defining what a grant proposal is to give you a full understanding of what a grant proposal is. Then we're going to be showing you how to write a grant proposal for funding, the format of a grant proposal, and the essential component that your grant proposal should include. Then after that, we are going to be looking at how to make your grant proposal stand out. Your grant proposal should be very attractive and convincing, so funders can be willing to invest in your project. Then we are going to be going to the grant management process. Like I said earlier, the grant management process can be very tedious, and it goes from the beginning of the project to the end of the project after a grant has been secured. Then finally, the takeaway is the tips for securing grant proposal. Some important things that you need to note to give you an edge over those competing with you for the grant that you are seeking. So let's dive into it. So first of all, what is a grant proposal? A grant proposal is a formal proposal submitted to a government or civilian entity that outlines a proposed project and shows budgetary requirements and requests monetary assistance in form of a grant. From this definition, there are some keywords that should be noted. First of all, a grant should be written to a government or civilian entity. Also, the grant proposal should outline the research project. The proposal should also show the budgetary requirements of the project and also state the monetary assistance needed. Those are some keywords you should note in this definition, as we will see later in this tutorial. What are the essential components that are required to be in a research grant proposal? Excellent grant writing is crucial to the success of your proposal. However, while a funder may require that your grant request be presented in a particular format, most grant applications adhere to the following format. Your grant proposal should include, first of all, an executive summary. What is an executive summary? An executive summary should include information on the problem or the need your organization is ready to tackle in this research project, and a description of the proposed solution, as well as funding needed for the project to be accomplished. So in summary, this section should include the problem that has been identified, the proposed solution, and the funding needed to solve this problem. The next section that should be included in your research grant proposal is the case for need. This section of your grant request presents enough evidence to convince the potential funder of the need for the project. The narrative should convey that your organization both understands the problem and can solve it. So this is the section where you want to convince your funders that this project is worth investing in. Next is the project overview. This is the section where you want to outline the research project, including sections like the objective section, where you explain the objective of the research, the method section where you outline the whole method on how you want to solve the problem. The design and evaluation section should all be included in your proposal. Next is the project budget, one of the most important sections. A project budget contains a statement of the projected expenses. In this section, a project narrative should be included to explain how you arrived at your final numbers. At this point, you need to be realistic and transparent. And finally, to be included is the organization overview. This should give a brief statement of your organization's name, the history of the organization, the mission and reputation of the organization, and the ability to fulfill the project. This is the section where you want to show your reputation as a researcher and your integrity and ability and capability to carry out the project. You can also include a CV of how you successfully handled grants in the past. Moving on, let's look at how to make your grant proposal stand out. There are a lot of needs around us in the world today that requires intervention. Therefore, researchers cannot lack research or intervention ideas. However, the process for seeking funding can be very overwhelming and highly competitive. Therefore, grant seekers should note the following factors. It is important to note that those who meet the grant goals better than all other applicants will receive the funding, not necessarily those with the greatest need. So there may be an enormous need in a certain area, but if that need is not in line with the grant goals, it is very difficult to get that grant. For example, there may be a need for prostate cancer research in an environment, but if the funding organization focuses on pancreatic cancer, it will be very hard for you to convince those funders to fund your prostate cancer research. So it is very important to note that those who meet grant goals better than all applicants are those that are more likely to secure funding for their research in form of grants. Also note that your grant proposal should be brief, concise, and convincing enough for money to be spent on. And worthy of note is that funders give grants on a competitive basis. Most grant proposals get approved not necessarily because they are done right. Applicants that the review committee scored highest are the ones who secure the grants. And every researcher that seeks funding should note that future funding will depend on your satisfactory performance on the current or past projects. Now, the most important aspect after a grant has been secured is the grant management process. Grant management is the process and method researchers and organizations go through to oversee a grant. Every grant awardee must concentrate on making the funding work for the purpose of the research. Some tips and requirements for managing grants include putting your mission first. Do not put the needs of your funders ahead of the needs of the problem you are trying to solve. Instead, let them go hand in hand. Then secondly, you want to understand all the costs involved in your project. You don't want to under budget, which will be detrimental to fulfilling your research, and you don't want to over budget for the research, which means you have to understand all the costs involved in fulfilling the mission of your research. Also, you need to plan to monitor and track funds. Grant giving organization may require you to submit details of this upon request. That means from the beginning you have to write out a plan on how you are going to monitor and track the funds of the grants you are seeking. And for your own benefit, you may choose to involve your financial department to administer and manage grant budgets. Handling grants effectively encompasses every part of a grant's lifecycle, from pre-award through post-award of the grant. This includes following grants regulations. Most grants come with restrictions and guidelines that the funders may require you to follow for proper management of the grant. So when handling such grants, you have to follow those regulations so you don't have any problem with your funders. Also, very important is meeting deadlines. You must schedule your project to meet grant deadlines and report on the progress of the grant. Funders may be willing to sponsor your project for only a specific period of time, so it is only wise to schedule your project to meet the deadline of such grants. And you also have to be able to report on the progress of the grant. And most important when dealing with funds is financial transparency. This shows your integrity as a researcher. Also, you may need to give potential funders clear documents on how you intend to account for the grant at the pre-award stage. All these factors are essential to securing grants and accomplishing your mission. And finally, for takeaways, here are some tips for securing grants to give you an edge above your competitors. Worthy of note is that soliciting funds for an activity is never easy. Grant proposals are used to convince organizations to fund your project. Therefore, your proposal has to be attractive and convincing. Here are some tips to make this happen. First of all, before you write your grant proposal, it is important to research about your potential donors. This will give you adequate information about your donors, and your competitors may not know of some of this information. And this will help you to pattern your proposal tailor-made for each potential donor. And you can also find out some important information about each donor, like the kind of project they like to fund and what they usually require to fund a project. Also, to make your grant proposal attractive to donors, you want to list down the benefit of sponsoring your project. Most sponsors will be attracted to sponsoring your project if they know that it's going to benefit them in some way. Some of those benefits can include publicity for your donors, like including their name or logo on flyers or souvenirs that are going to be used for the research project. Next, you want to be honest and realistic when stating how much you need for your project. Like I mentioned earlier, financial transparency is very important when writing your grant proposal. In your grant proposal, you may also want to provide additional documents like ethical approval or permits that you have obtained to carry out that research. This can add to convincing potential donors. And one key factor that most grant seekers miss is proofreading their grant proposal before submission. You want your grant proposal to be very flawless, so it is very important to proofread your grant proposal before submitting it. At least 2 or more persons should help you proofread your grant proposal before submitting it, because there are some things that your eye may not see. If you try to proofread by yourself, your brain may not be able to spot some mistakes. Finally, and most importantly, you can learn much of what you need to know to write a successful proposal by talking to the agency offering the grant. I hope you have learned some very important things from this tutorial. If this was helpful, please click on the like button and subscribe for more. Thank you very much for listening to the end. I wish you success in your grant proposal. See you in the next video. Cheers.